goes on before the intro is just on the Patreon, so like maybe two people hear it. I don't know.
Okay, I just didn't want to, make trouble. So, and
No,
I've got a couple of things pulled up website wise too, because I know I'm going to think of something and want to look it up real fast. So,
no, like one of the other podcasts to do is the Sci-Fi Sanctuary one. Sometimes we record like at a temple and it's like windy and it's just like sound damaged and yeah.
do you love Japan? Have you enjoyed living there? I guess you're still there, so
Yeah,
probably,
yeah. Yeah,
right?
still here. I haven't been outside the country since 2010.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, yeah. And I make people visit me here. So
Well, that's tempting. I mean, that does make a lot of sense. I just went east for the first time in 3 years. I hadn't seen my parents in 3 years, so that was, shocking a little bit because they're, in their early 80s now. So,
mm-mm.
but yeah, the pandemic sort of, grounded me for a little bit. So, but then now I get to work from home, which is kind of ideal because I kind of love that. So we're still trying to my husband and I, Aaron, who we got married in 2018 in Savannah. So this is the first time we'd been back to Savannah since then. We've been trying to move east, but things like pandemics come up and it makes it a little harder. But anyway,
Yeah, yeah. Like my folks came out here in 2019. So just a pretty good timing, I guess. And I guess they're probably gonna come this October, maybe. So yeah.
that's nice.
Because
My
I
dad
just get
doesn't fly, so he's like, well, wherever I'm going, you're coming this way. So that's
oh
cool that your parents are more mobile.
I'm kind of being like your dad. I'm like, I don't want to be on a 15-hour flight.
Oh my
I got
gosh.
I've got long legs.
Ours was 4.5 one way and 5.5 on the way back. And like, that's just across the country. But like, that's already too much. I don't know. Door to door is like 12 hours. So whatever.
Yeah, I hardcore hate the Pacific flight, especially for an East Coaster, it's even worse because you add on a cross
Hmm.
country along with it, and yeah,
Hmm.
but that's cool. I didn't leave this my little valley for like 3 years actually. I mean, there's plenty of things in the valley, but for pandemic, we never actually locked down here. That was kind of yeah. So that's a shared experience I never quite got.
Is that because the Japanese are naturally like courteous of others and wear masks naturally, or it just wasn't part of what the government said to do?
Both of those. I mean, I was teaching on Zoom for like 2 months in 2020, and then again last year we did it for a month when the numbers spiked. But
Mm.
yeah, yeah. I mean, people. I mean, especially if you're not in Tokyo, we always socially distance to start with. You don't really get in people's faces, so yeah.
Mhm.
I'll be curious. In May, the government's like, okay, we're going to downgrade Corona. You can all like stop wearing masks all the time unless you want to. I mean, it's not law people to do it, right? But
Mhm.
I'm curious if they're even going to, because I think a lot of people in Japan just like it now because it's another like layer of hiding.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, my parents are like, "Oh, I can't wait till we don't have to wear these." And I'm like, I kind of like it, and it makes me feel safe, and it's such a small thing to do to like, protect yourself. So,
Yeah, no, I don't like it. If they're like drop them out. I mean, at work we have to, right? So, stores have signs and stuff that tell you to do that. But yeah, yeah, I don't like it. It's funny because when I talk to Mark, because Mark, I guess America people don't, and Mark does. So we're like on
mhm.
opposite ends. Where he's like, I'm like, yeah, I just want the option not to, right? But everybody does, including myself. When I'm in places that want that, and he's like going around and people are giving him weird eyes for wearing one, right? So, yeah, he's
Yeah, Seattle and Savannah were very different. There were a lot more people in a grocery store in Seattle that are still wearing them, and in Savannah, it was like one employee that was, so yeah, it's different. Americans are great at taking things all the wrong ways. So there's been a real mixed bag of responses. So
I've seen a dude wearing a mask in a sauna a few times. I'm like, why?
how do you
Don't
breathe?
what? Yeah, what are you doing, man? Like, yeah, people still drive by themselves wearing a mask, which seems a little weird. So, yeah, if anything, my concern in Japan is it's now actually become part of the culture, and they're not going to drop it.
Mm,
Even when
maybe,
they can, they won't drop it. That's my concern. Um,
maybe.
I guess we should get rolling on this. I'm actually
Sure.
wearing this because after this, I'm just going to go straight to work. So
Okay, well, let me see. I'm
I
losing
got two
light, so I'm
hours. Yeah,
gonna
I'm not. I'm
try
not. I
that.
mean, there's no. It's not rushed. I have time. I just yeah.
Okay.
just
Well,
figure.
thanks for inviting me, by the way. Like I didn't listen to any of the other episodes because I didn't want to get self-conscious about it. I wanted to be as natural as possible. So I've got 8 pages of notes and the internet, and I think I can, contribute from there.
Oh, okay. What I have like one block of notes for each show, right? So of course I
Oh
do
yeah,
like
I
several
saw
of these a
them.
week.
They're like
So
stream of consciousness.
the very stream of consciousness. So I'll give you the roadmap of how the podcast works.
Yeah.
We'll do an intro. In fact, let me bring up my. You might have noticed that the prologue's there because I'm going to make you read that. So, um, hold on, documents. Yeah, so do an intro. I'll do a bit of trivia. I'll have you read a prologue, and then for a while we just kind of bump observations for however long. Um, and I conclude the episodes with 3 questions, which I could let you in on now, or you could wait and just
I'll
be
wait.
surprised. Okay.
I'll wait and be surprised. We'll see. We'll see how it goes.
Uh,
So the prologue is that you walk into this room at your own risk, or is that at the end?
sorry, I'm just looking at. I just brought up the notes for the prisoners, the schizoid man instead of the obsolete man, so I was like super confused. It's like where's the prologue? What number 6 isn't in this? It
That'd
could
be great
be.
if we're covering different episodes. That would be a fun listening experience.
That'd be good. A good April Fool's one. Yeah. Eh, I'm lining up my April Fool's plans for multiple podcasts because I do a few. This one, the guy that I do sci-fi stuff with sometimes is on. He does this thing called the Game Show, which is 4 British guys screaming insults at each other for an hour, basically. So the joke is they're going to have to like seriously consider an episode of the Twilight Zone, and they're just going to do that week's episode. I'll probably record one as well because I now have listeners, so they might be annoyed if I skip an episode. But for April Fools, I'm going to put theirs out, right? And, and then Mark and I've been doing one for the Prisoner. So for that one, for April Fools, and that's the actual release date of the podcast. April Fools is the day for it. So we're gonna do an episode on Jackie Chan's movie The Prisoner, and wonder where the fuck number 6 is the entire time.
I love that show, The Prisoner. That's really good. I haven't seen all of it, but I was introduced to that a couple of years ago, and it's solid. It's really
Yeah.
fun.
But yeah, that's when Mark and we just started publishing. We started recording them like last April or something. I just started publishing them in January, and we went with the name in Prison. It's an The Prisoner podcast. I'm not sure if that's grammatically correct or not, but I think it's great. So you walk into this room at your own risk is the prologue. Let me format it because you get a long one. Sorry. They've been getting longer recently. The guy I had on Monday also got like a really long one. Yeah, there's a big block of text.
This was a lot of words. I'll do my best.
Many words, yeah. Yeah, I'm starting to feel bad about making people because it used to be like a third of this, right? But I guess Rod's more comfortable like being on camera by this point, so he can say more. I don't know.
Hmm. I saw in your note that you said like you thought a lot of people like this episode, but this is a tough one. I'm fixing my lamp, but this is like a really dark one.
Oh yeah, but people like dark ones sometimes.
Usually, yeah, I don't know. It's hard. I like what you said about, I mean, not to jump ahead, but I like what you said about what is he doing those other 47 hours? Like probably not much. It's just a
Hanging in
very
his room.
somber thing.
Yeah.
And
Um,
how many Burgess Meredith episodes have come already? At least
uh,
one, right? The Dingle one.
Dingle, Time Enough at Last, and there's one more in the future, and the name of it's escaping me. But yeah, this is 3 of 4.
The Printer's Devil
Yes, that sounds right.
is the
So
last one, and he also narrates the movie, but I'll
right,
save that fact for later. Okay.
yeah. I think that's in my trivia anyway. So what I'm gonna do is just I'm gonna shut up for 5 seconds so I can spot in the audio, and then I'll go ahead and go straight into an introduction. Hello, welcome to Time Enough Podcast. It's where we get into episodes of the Twilight Zone and beyond. This is Matt here, and joining me today is, you know what? I should have like asked you a bit more about how to do an intro because my intro is Dorian's an old friend. Mark had her email. It turned out to be the email I probably had in the first place. And you talk movies, and we used to talk movies, lots of screwball comedies and black and white. We're still black and white, but if you want to elaborate on what you're up to in the film world and why you wanted the obsolete man, you can rattle that off.
Oh, okay. Okay. So yes, my name is Dorian. I've known Matt for some time, although it's been a long time, 8,000 years, I think he said, and that's probably true. So I'm a media archivist, a film historian, and a writer. I currently work for an online magazine called Video Librarian. They do reviews of films for collection development in academic, specialty, and public libraries. And I also work for a film distributor. So there's a lot of films still sprinkled throughout my life. And I was excited about The Obsolete Man because I thought it was going to be about, before I saw it, I thought it was going to be about obsolete media. I thought that that's what the crux of the story would be about, but actually that's not true. It's about the man being obsolete for believing in books still. So a little bit darker than I expected, but I was really excited to see this one. So
Well, the books are the obsolete media in this case. That's where you're getting off okay here, because you're like, it's an online magazine. If it's a published magazine, you would be right in the star chamber to be declared obsolete by this point. Yeah.
well, and I love how, and I'm jumping ahead a little bit, they call them the narcotics you call literature. So that's intense.
I
So
guess they couldn't have imagined a Kindle at this point in time. So
no, and they also refer to the librarian as just books, which isn't really what our librarians are anymore. That's like a 60s version of just books, as opposed to now where, film and media is a part of what the librarian's job is. So as a librarian slash archivist, yeah, I was intrigued to see this one, and it was much sadder than I expected it to be, but also great.
yeah, this one I it quickly went up to my list of my favorite episodes. I got the It's one of the first ones that I watched when I got the Blu-ray set last year. I think I was like, oh, it'll be a while till I get to the end of season 2. Although I'm here now, it's been a while, but yeah. So I watched a few, and this one really stuck with me, and I was like, oh, this must be like everybody's favorite. And actually, I found, like, doing a few chats online and things, that this one has some points of contention for some people, which we'll get into. Uh, First, though, I want to do just a smattering of trivia on the episode. The original air date was June 2nd, 1961, and the script is by Rod Serling. Elliot Silverstein directed this along with 4 other episodes of The Twilight Zone. He also helmed the Academy Award winning feature film comedy Western Cat Ballou, which I saw far too many times as an 80s child because the VHS was on my aunt's VHS rack. And I'm at 6 years old. It's like, oh, I want the movie with cat in it, right? Even though it doesn't really have anything to do with that. Burgess Meredith is Romney Wordsworth, and he's basically Twilight Zone royalty. This is beyond his 4 Zone appearances. He served as a narrator in the reboot movie and is fully qualified to deathmatch Danny DeVito for the role of Batman's Penguin.
Yes, I figured that and Rocky are probably the things that are most known these days when people think of Burgess Meredith,
Oh
right?
yeah, you give him a robot. Yeah, okay. Because Rocky 4 is the only true Rocky movie. I heard recently, I don't know if this was a joke or not, if this was a bit, but Sylvester Stallone being like he wanted to recut Rocky 4 without the robot, when that's not correct. Don't do that. Yeah.
Mm-mm,
Okay.
mm-mm.
Two votes against that, right?
Agreed. But and
Oh,
another thing I think about when I think about Rocky is how raspy Burgess Meredith's voice is, but he didn't get raspier with age. He really was raspy in the beginning. So it's almost the same voice that you're hearing in the 60s as you hear a little bit later. He's still got that distinctive sound.
it's weird though. I did watch the Twilight Zone movie about a year and a half ago, and I felt like he was kind of like had a more singing quality than I was used to when he was doing the voice work. Like maybe he was more self-conscious about his voice and tried to smooth it out for that
Mm.
movie. Or maybe I'm just remembering it wrong. I don't know.
Well, another thing about this role, since he had played someone who loved books earlier in the show, right? So there was the earlier episode, and now he is a librarian by profession. So it's sort of like I mean, you can't compare the two different characters, but that's kind of interesting that he starts as one and they're like, hey, let's bring him back and make him a librarian. Like it
And,
seems like they're connected behind the scenes a little bit.
And the next one's a printer. So I mean, I guess it's an evil printer, judging by the
I
title.
think
But
he's the devil in that. So,
oh, that's cool.
close.
Okay, I can
Natural
take.
progression.
Yeah, we already saw Fritz Weaver in Third from the Sun, and he plays the Chancellor here. Weaver would get weird for genre TV in Serling's Night Gallery and the non-Serling X-Files. In film, he showed up in Failsafe, Marathon Man, and the Thomas Crown Affair. And then I just typed G. I think I might have fallen asleep on my keyboard at that point. So that means trivia over. Okay. Dorian, I am throwing the prologue for you. Some people do the Rod Serling. I've had people try and do like a Southern madman, or you could just read it in a normal voice. All of those are all of those options are available to you.
I'm going to go as normal and as eloquent as I can. So start anytime.
Yep.
All right. You walk into this room at your own risk because it leads to the future. Not a future that will be, but one that might be. This is not a new world. It is simply an extension of what began in the old one. It has patterned itself after every dictator who has ever planted the ripping imprint of a boot on the pages of history since the beginning of time. It has refinements, technological advances, and a more sophisticated approach to the destruction of human freedom. But like every one of the super states that preceded it, it has one iron rule: logic is an enemy and truth is a menace. This is Mr. Romney Wordsworth in his last 48 hours on Earth. He's a citizen of the state, but will soon have to be eliminated because he's built out of the flesh and because he has a mind, Mr. Romney Wordsworth, who will draw his last breaths in the Twilight Zone.
All right. Thanks. So I guess one of the things that sticks in my mind for this episode, straight up, is I feel like this is one of the best minimalist sets ever. Um, in my notes, I compared it basically like it's this or Doctor Strangelove's War Room, which honestly is an even better minimalist set. But this is on a TV budget, so sure.
Yeah, and it's disproportionate. Like it makes, the whole point is that the state is this overwhelming power and everyone is small in comparison. So just from the opening shot of the chancellor sitting in whatever that is, sort of like a judge's throne almost, to the jury, quote unquote jury, standing alongside like, like in a military formation. Like it's about making him, and the doors are giant. Like I don't even know how they got, like the soundstage must have been quite large to have doors open like that. And it makes a great first impression.
I think there actually was some notable work for those doors. I should have had the sense to go look at the Twilight Zone companion when I was doing my trivia, and I didn't. Oops, I let Wiki do it for me. But I do remember that actually being an issue for building this set. I mean, you still got to spend some money on even a minimalist set. They're not just some Twilight Zones have just used the sound stage as the set.
Mm-hmm.
So
the backlot, yes.
Well, I mean, the soundstage is even lazier. I mean, I shouldn't say lazy. It's like the very first episode. Where's everybody when he comes out of his little MK Ultra chamber? It's just this is the soundstage, but it's like, well, okay, that seems like a military warehouse too, so it's fine. And that episode also extensively using backlots, of course. So, but this one,
well,
yeah.
And the set that has the most going on is Romney's room with all of the books and the bookcases, and that contrast between the stark area where he's judged and sent to death and versus his home that he's made this sort of comforting thing, and he's surrounded with all the things that he loves, including that Bible that he stashes away for 20 years because it's illegal, because what was it, the state has proven there is no God. So that's the comfy set.
That is the biggest point of contention I found. People don't like in this episode that his striking back against the state is basically religious based, which in 1960 61 we've hit a few times where maybe religion is taken in a slightly different way than it would be now. We're just coming out of the 50s where you go to church and sit next to Ned Flanders or whatever, right? So
But that wasn't the crux of their argument for sentencing him. It was the thing about the field investigators in your sector have classified you as obsolete because you have no function, you're anachronistic, and you're a ghost from another time, which is a really great compliment, but obviously not in this context. And then he
Yeah,
calls him an ugly crawling bug and delusional. So I thought the religion was sort of an afterthought. Like they didn't really reveal that part about the Bible until like much later in. So that's interesting that that's something that people don't like about it, because I didn't think that was the forefront of the reason he was being liquidated. I thought that was yet another book that he held precious.
yeah, yeah. So they basically gave him the sentence of being a hipster.
An
It's too bad he didn't.
obsolete hipster.
It's too bad he didn't have like the little mustache tattoo on his finger. That would be a nice touch. They can do that if they remake it.
He had that really random Pegasus statue. When the chancellor comes to visit him at his home or room or apartment or whatever that area is, did you remember that Pegasus random Pegasus statue right on that table, and a book that was like a foot tall? Like they really went out of their way to find the thickest book they could to put in the foreground of that scene, where everything else was pretty normal in the background. But that's what I
Now,
remember from
now that you mention it, I guess I kind of remember that statue, but no, it's not something I really like consciously hit. So, but I was thinking like, yeah, the Bible reading just in 2023, there are people that are rubbed the wrong way by that. Again, for me, it's the point is he's obsolete. It doesn't really matter what book he's reading from in the end. But now I was like, would it be like cool if he just started like reading the lyrics of Black Sabbath instead?
that.
Have a very metal kind of death. That'd be cool.
I mean, I
So
don't know. I think that was sort of the biggest insult, right? He said that was his most prized possession because that was the thing that was the most against the state. So I think it all makes a lot of sense. I mean, this is a totalitarian, dystopian place. So like that just seems like the greatest symbol that could be used. So I don't know. I think it makes perfect sense.
it's like a
I like the use of it.
it's like a triple metaphor forbidden fruit or something. I guess that's kind of cool. So but yeah, his room, I mean there's only two sets in this. I guess we could count the staircase outside as a third set, but that's not really a set. They can just go use the staircase probably. So I'm
Mm-hmm.
not sure what they would do in 1960. Maybe there might be union things like no, they got to build you a staircase or something. But yeah, but we got three sets at most basically. So it is, that's what I like about this episode. It feels pretty epic, but it's quite small scale. I
Mm-hmm.
guess
That's a good way to put it. Yeah.
like the
Mm-hmm.
ideas are like pretty epic, I suppose. Um, I don't know what would you read to the commandant in this case if you're going to amuse him for 20 minutes before we all blow up.
I don't know. I mean, I also thought that one of the reasons he did that was to, because, the whole way that that scene ends is in the name of God. So, I mean, maybe that is just the most robust thing that you can read to a soulless, nervous chancellor, in moments before his presumed death. So, I don't know. It's hard to beat that one.
I don't have so many paper books anymore. I'm looking at my bookshelf, mostly filled with disc, which in its own way makes me my own obsolete man, having just a ton of you know DVDs and stuff, right?
I've been
That's
wondering
a
about your
weird.
collection, if it had waned over the years, or if you're like holding strong at your like tens of thousands.
Yeah, there's quite. I mean, I can't. I'm on a laptop. I can't turn the camera, but I have insane amounts. You know, Tower Records actually is still in Japan. We still have them, but about 2019 or so, they finally became a ghost of their former self. I'm like, well, my room is now a Tower Records, so I guess we're good. But yeah,
That's something. Go ahead.
I was just like I found like in a car, like I've gotten obsolete. For a long time I was using playing MP3s or whatever, but as people wanted to charge their phones, I kind of went back to just playing CDs most of the time.
My last rental car did not have a CD player. The one before it did, but then that was eliminated, so there could be like a cleaner line on the dashboard. But back to DVDs, like that's something that I see in my job. The transition, especially because of the pandemic, the transition from it being very common to send physical screeners to reviewers or to release things on DVD has just completely been shattered by the streaming market and all these different platforms. And that's actually something I was going to ask you was how did you watch this episode? Because I watched it on a advertising video on demand channel, Pluto. That was where it was most available. So that's a whole other conversation. But just how we are consuming media and how much it's changed is a really interesting part of this
Oh, I'm doing
continuation
this
of the story.
obsolete style.
I love it. I love it.
Yeah. Weirdly though, sometimes not so much for the Twilight Zone, but I do podcasts on movies and stuff, and sometimes I'll have the DVD like a meter away here that I could grab, but it's just easier just to download it and watch it on my laptop and do my notes and all that sort of stuff. So
Mm-hmm.
I am horribly lazy about that sometimes, but
It's the way of the world. Like the DVD is dying, the Blu-ray is dying, just like every other media format before it. So it's hard as a media archivist. That's pretty hard to see. And there are also lots of complications to streaming and rights and availability and purchasing something that's an intangible thing, and then they take it off your platform, and then you lose the possession that you had. It's a big mess. It's an interesting evolution, and it's going to get more and more complicated.
yeah, I mean, if you made this episode now, you'd have what, like John Cusack's character from High Fidelity or something as the obsolete man.
Mm.
That oh here we go. I put what I was trying to look at my bookshelf, like what would I read while we're waiting midnight, and I actually made a note. The book's not in here; it's at my parents' house in America, but I would go with the 1992 Rolling Stone album guide as the thing you're reading. The bad reviews, but for good bands. Maybe that's why I talked about Black Sabbath, because I remember that album guide rips Black Sabbath a new one. So it would be fun to read those reviews.
So you would like torment the chancellor as opposed to try to convert him in the last like few moments. You would just needle him.
Yeah, I'd read the reviews for the Black Sabbath records, which were unjustly maligned in that book. And then the review for Tacos putting on the Ritz album, which I think they gave a half star to, and that one kind of deserves it, but yeah.
I don't know. That's still a pretty legendary song.
Oh no, I got a weird obsession with that for no reason about 3 weeks ago. The video, which is highly bizarre. So and apparently if you find it in its original version, also highly offensive, but they did re-edit it a bit.
Oh,
They had like people
interesting.
tap dancing in blackface originally or something,
Oh
and
my God. No,
they
why?
changed it. That's not in there. I did not on the official taco website. You will not see that version. So
No, I would think not by now. Jeez.
excuse me, official taco YouTube channel if you are looking for it, which I believe also includes modern taco reaction videos. So I don't remember what he's reacting to, but it's something. You said you had a ton of notes, so I
Yeah,
guess I'll throw the ball in your court.
Yeah, I was thinking the next thing that was interesting, because he was given the choice to be liquid. Well, he was not given the choice. He was going to be liquidated, but the chancellor was like, "Hey, you can choose when and how." So he had 48 hours to do it. And the first three things that the chancellor mentions is you can do pills, you can do gas, or you can do electrocution. And then, of course, Burgess Meredith gets this twinkle and he's like, "Oh, let me ask for some special conditions here. What if I meet my assassin? And how about if it's just a secret between us, like how it's going to go?" And the chancellor was like, "Yeah, sure." Like no suspicion, it seems. Seems a little strange, but and so then of course what his method is he requests to be blown up. So by a very small bomb, by the way, like by the time that actually goes off and the chancellor is safely in the staircase, that seems like that would not have killed a person. It just would have like horribly maimed them. Was that just my impression, or did
Well,
that seem like a pretty?
if nobody comes in and give him medical attention, then it will still probably work out in the end.
You're right. I didn't think about that.
I was thinking, is this like, does he live in like a probably government, but a public apartment? Because they just have to blow up one unit of an apartment, then, right? Which would be
And
a
he
little
said that
difficult.
it would be difficult, and also it seems like it's a part of a greater thing. But he mentions how he's isolated, and that's how that like ruse of getting the chancellor to visit him and locking him in the room works because he's like, oh well, you can't cry for help because there's no one around because you've isolated me like you said you would. So I don't know if that's like the condemned person. No, it can't be. It's not the condemned person's place because it had all this stuff there. So that's kind of hazy. I'm unclear like how that could be his home, but also he could be completely isolated, or maybe they
They
evacuated everyone else.
they said he was under review for a year, so it could just be that's kind of like a halfway house or a home arrest prison sort of thing. Because I mean, it's certainly nicer in a prison cell, but
That makes sense. And that would kind of explain why I just thought he was messy, but maybe it was because he had to condense all of his things into that one room. And that's how it was just sort of overflowing with the things he cared about, the
I mean
books and the Pegasus statue.
that's Burgess Meredith's man cave,
Right, exactly.
or the unsubtly named Wordsworth if we're going with the character's name.
Super subtle. Yeah. Oh, I was just, I was okay. So I'm looking at all my random notes, and the chancellor really relished when I was saying that he didn't seem very suspicious that Meredith had or Wordsworth had a different plan in mind, but really he was just so like relishing his power to say yes. I can approve that request for you. Like that, it seemed like he was caught up in his own ego, and that maybe was why it didn't occur to him that there could be something tricky behind that. And of course, later it's when Meredith says, "You underestimated me," and that's a good moment.
Like, I mean, I guess we can assume, and from the end where they all just start growling and stuff, I mean, we can assume that these people are basically stupid. They don't read books. They're probably speaking like a language that's like missing half of the words by this point. So they don't have the means to think. Yeah, it is
That
a kind of a
growling
subtle.
noise was super eerie, and they move like zombies. Like, I mean, that was very deliberate to have this animalistic thing. And you don't really know what happens to the chancellor at the end because they cut right over the rod, in his cigarettes. But
They eat his
that
brains.
it looked like they were going to consume him almost, which is not how it went for Meredith. So I don't know. Is it because he was one of their own, or he was supposed to be better than that? But like they literally dragged him down.
Well, maybe things are like worse in this fascist society 3 days later. There's been some laws passed, so the procedure is now different.
And the whole thing about it being recorded, that was the other part of his request, was that a television camera be set up, was on the wall, and it was three different lenses. So I'm not quite sure how that worked, and at first I thought that that was not real. I thought that that was part of the joke, that he pretended that it was being televised so that the chancellor would truly be stuck. But it seems like it was, because when the chancellor gets back, then everyone knows what's happened. So that really was a live hookup. It was a televised event. Like he said, like the chancellor mentioned the mass executions that had happened earlier. And he was bragging how they'd killed 1,300 people in less than 6 hours. And what a great televised event that had been. So I think it's not just that they're doing these things, but there's this what was that sort of behavior that people had when they went to executions for fun, or beheadings and guillotines and things like that. It's tapping into that sort of like vicious human nature of wanting to see the demise of these people deemed as less than. So that's an extra chilling element to it.
Yeah, they didn't have Richard Bachman yet to come up with the Running Man idea. That could have worked. You just put Burgess Meredith in one of those sparkly suits and throw him into the Running Man pit. See what happens.
He would have looked great in glitter. I mean,
Burgess Meredith and glitter. Yeah, I can go for that. Um,
Also, I have a note about how when the countdown was happening, they're really building that suspense with those superimposed clocks that were like flying by in front as the chancellor got more and more nervous. And that was the only effect that was in the episode, was that the clocks and the clock faces that were like zooming in and out to heighten that suspense of the countdown.
that's the credit sequence for Twilight Zone too. I don't remember if it's that for season two or not. Oh well. Um, uh, just if any, yeah, I guess knowing how the sausage is made. Usually when the credits are rolling, I'm like bringing up my word processor and typing the title of the episode to start my notes. So, um, yeah, I should maybe I should pay more attention to the title sequences. And I'll say, hey, now that we're at the end of season two, I'm just gonna say it. think I like the first season Twilight Zone theme better.
Ooh, shots fired.
Yeah, yeah. Come on, I'm shooting. I'm taking a shot for Bernard Herrmann there. I mean, come on.
Fair, fair, fair.
We should take a shot at the Twilight Zone for replacing a Bernard Herrmann theme. But yeah, I guess it's not quite as radio catchy for sure. So
Yeah, that's probably it. And how many more seasons are there? It was five total.
yeah, so we
Wow.
got three more, including the bizarre season 4 of 50-minute episodes that are apparently mostly 20 minutes too long. So
So do you also you had the prologue? Did you also have the epilogue? Or I wrote that down. Would you like me to read that?
yeah, go for it.
Okay, so as the chancellor is being, presumably eaten, but at very least attacked and dragged down, he says, any state, any entity, any ideology that fails to recognize the worth, the dignity, the rights of man, that state is obsolete.
Oh, so much shorter. That's why you want the epilogue in the first place. Yeah.
It is
Okay.
shorter. And then after that, he says, a case to be filed under M for mankind in the Twilight Zone. And then we got an Oasis cigarette commercial. I
Were they
didn't see that
smooth?
coming. I guess so. I've never even heard of Oasis, but that's clever to end your season by giving a nod to your sponsor because it
Uh,
wasn't too blatant. Doesn't
well, I've
seem.
heard I've heard a lot about Oasis cigarettes because I've now gotten through 2 seasons of the Twilight Zone. So and Gunsmoke, I got a bumper for Gunsmoke right after that. Yeah, that's cool.
So Oasis was the sponsor for the whole time, or at least for these first two seasons.
Oh, was Oasis in the first one? I think there's occasionally something else. So, although I have noted you don't see him actually smoking it on camera much. He just holds it.
He
It's his
holds it, and the
crutch.
smoke sort of wafts by. So yeah, it's a subtle but ever-present component.
But yeah, that was the crutch, because he was nervous on camera, at least at first. I guess he probably still was later on. It's like, I got my cigarette, I'm good, you know.
I didn't
um,
realize that. I didn't know that. I thought that was a tie-in to the sponsor, but you're saying it was actually like a mechanism that he used for performance.
yeah, yeah, kind of just to chill out a little bit. I mean, probably looks cool, right? So, I mean, in the end, the man probably shouldn't have smoked all the cigarettes he did, but he was not doing it on camera. He was just holding it on camera most of the time. So, I mean, think about can you imagine Rod Serling actually taking a puff off of his cigarette? Like, you can't really visualize that much. He's
Mm-mm.
too busy talking to you. Yeah.
And looking sternly at you. I mean, there's a very, serious, somber, intriguing way that he introduces things and swoops back in. And, you can tell that his writing, he enjoys his writing. That maybe that doesn't sound right, but he does a great job of writing and he does a great job of speaking the words that he's written. It's a powerful part of the whole series.
Yeah, I mean, he wrote 97 of 156 episodes of this thing. So there's a few pot boilers. There's a few where you definitely see him just by the pool with a gin tonic, like talking to a dictaphone, and that ended up being the episode. This one has some thought in it. Uh, I don't feel like this is a by the pool dictaphone episode. If it was, that's great too. But if he was enjoying himself while writing a dystopia, that's cool too. Um, I guess I'll start asking my questions for this episode. The
Okay.
first of which, who in this episode goes into the Twilight Zone?
Oh. I'm going to say Fritz Weaver does because the tables are turned on him more than anyone else. Like Burgess Meredith walks in knowing what his fate is, but Fritz Weaver absolutely does not expect anything that's happening to him, and is has the most dramatic turnabout.
Not the Chancellor, but Fritz Weaver himself.
I meant the Chancellor.
Yeah, I mean that was my take too, because Wordsworth is very much like on top of the situation. He's already accepted his fate like before the episode starts. So if anything, he's from the Twilight Zone. He's the instigator. Um, but I do kind of want to throw. Oh, we got a freeze there. Da-da. There you go.
Okay.
Yeah, freezing seems to be over. Anyway, I'll see an edit point. Um, where was I?
So
Yeah,
you
yeah.
agreed that Burgess Meredith had sort of knew what was going on the whole time.
Well, he made the situation happen, didn't he? This is his fiendish plan, if you want to call it. I mean, I guess in terms of the society, it's a fiendish plan. For us, it's a great plan. Our main concern was simply that some people don't like that the religious angle. But again, I'll give him that because why not at this point? That's fine. It's not like he's going fire and brimstone. He's just reading stuff. So
He was very defiant the whole time. I mean, when there are a lot of times when he was being yelled at by the chancellor and he was just, he wasn't really looking at him. He was just sort of looking down and listening and absorbing sort of the hatred that was being thrown at him. And so, I thought he did his whole character from start to finish maintain that dignity. He maintained the pride in his profession. He maintained the fact that he was right and that, he was seeing the demise of the state and seeing how these people behaved, but he seemed true to himself and confident that he was on the right side of history.
I mean, it's an anthology show, but it just gives Burgess Meredith's character such a weird arc that he's kind of pitiful, as in we're going to pity him in Time Enough to Last. He's an imbecile in Mr. Dingle. He's a dingle, they call him that. And here, but he's still being pressed upon, he's still being like oppressed as he is to a certain degree in other ones. But here he comes out as, relatively noble while still stammering like Burgess Meredith most of the time. So
Mm-hmm.
stammering not as a vocal tick, but as just the his style of speaking. So,
Mm-hmm.
um, but let's go ahead and keep the Chancellor and Wordsworth in mind for the second question. Real all those people growling at the end. They're in the Twilight Zone. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
they're
I
not
guess
behaving like
that's,
normal people anymore.
but they're behaving according to what the state has created. So in that world, that is sort of normal. But I see what you're saying.
I mean, this world is a Twilight Zone. I guess we get into the dystopias here and there. So,
Once you
um,
walk into the doors, you're already there. I guess that is exactly what the prologue says.
right. So we're going to focus this on Wordsworth and the Chancellor. Chancellor first, because the question works better with him. Did he deserve his trip into the Twilight Zone?
It's hard to say no. I mean, I
It is
think,
hard to say no in this one. I
yeah,
ask
I'm
this
going to
every
say
episode. Sometimes it's a snap answer, It's like, yes, he does. Well, maybe did he deserve to blow up with Wordsworth?
that was an interesting turn about like his last the Meredith's last Wordsworth's last act was to free him because he summoned the name of God. That was interesting, and he didn't have a whole lot of extra time. By the way, he got out there, and that was the dramatic moment of it exploding as he was getting down the stairs. And it seemed like that perhaps had made an impact on him, but then we don't really know what he was going to do next. We don't know if that changed how he was going to approach things when he gets back to his, that first room, gets back to business as usual. And by that point, though, everyone's already turned on him. So it could have been that there was redemption there, but it was too late in the eyes of the state for any alternative.
Actually, maybe it's not so flippant that I was like, oh, they just made new laws and that's why it works at the end because Wordsworth just found some serious loopholes. So maybe now they just straight up eat you and you don't get 48 hours and choose when your method of demise. Now you're just eaten by
The
ravenous people.
zombies.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they all seem to know what to do. They all like group think their way through that. They slid him down the table. Like that whole long table was there primarily for that slide at the end, right? It put distance between Meredith when he was being sentenced, but to use that again to have him, rush up and then be drawn back, that was very dramatic.
I mean, it's by any logical stretch of the mind a stupid ending, but it just works so well to play so well. But when you talk about it, yeah, it sounds stupid. They start, these people in brown shirts, I assume they're brown shirts, but start growling and seem to eat a dude. It's a weird
It's
ending.
scary though. It sounds silly, but it's much more sinister when you see it unfold.
Right. So I don't think Wordsworth went into the Twilight Zone. If anything, he's manipulating the Twilight Zone. But does he deserve his fate? He is accept. So here it's a more interesting question. He seems accepting of his fate. I mean,
So are you saying, does he objectively deserve it or does he believe he deserves it?
you can. I kind of leave the
Oh no, you
question
froze
vague in
again.
purpose. Yeah. Am I still frozen? Still frozen.
There you are,
Okay.
you're moving. Okay.
Yeah. So go ahead.
So does he deserve his fate? No, I don't think so. I think that he handles it as well as he possibly could. But, I think the point is that the audience is on the side of being very much against the fact that he deserves it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's kind of the crux of the episode in the end. That it's a horrible fate, and he does the best with it, and it doesn't even kill another dude in the end to do it. So, well, I guess. Well, again, if the guy didn't flip out, I guess maybe he wouldn't have been not sentenced himself, right? If he
Yeah,
also
I
kept his
guess
cool.
that's a good point too. I mean, just like we don't know what the chancellor would do after that incident sort of seemed to change his demeanor. We don't know if he hadn't evoked the name of God, if Meredith would have just, taken him along with them. Because it was moments away from that explosion. And he got out just in time. But if he hadn't said that, would he have just sat there? And then his last act would be killing someone else and taking someone else down with him, which is a much different tone.
Yeah, that would we'd be having a very different conversation if he did not let him out at the very last second, you know?
Mm-hmm. Then we would probably say maybe he did deserve it because he, took that his last act was vengeful. So
Right. So here is more just it was still kind of vengeful. I mean, he probably knew that the guy was gonna get maybe literally eaten alive. So
I think that's where he took out his anger. He took out his anger at the chancellor more than any. Well, he was the symbol of the state, so it was his last attempt at trying to show the chancellor like that he was following the wrong path.
right. Now, my last question for these episodes is to put this on the tripometer, 0 being not trippy at all, 5 being very trippy, except decimals. Sometimes people just give me weird sounds. So,
Do you have an example of a 0 and a 5, or this is all relative?
do you know the episode The Silence, which aired a few weeks before this one, where the guy has to take a bet to stay silent for a year?
Mm-mm. Who's in
Okay.
it?
Um, oh, geez. Dr. Smith from Lost in Space has a small role in it. That's all I'm remembering at the moment. Anyway,
Okay.
we simultaneously gave that a 0 or a 5 on the tripometer.
Okay. I'm gonna say that this is a hmm. I think it's low. I'm trying to assign a number to it, but I think it's low because there aren't any supernatural elements to it. So to me, trippiness and supernatural go hand in hand. And this is, futuristic and dystopian, but you know, there's nothing super trippy. So I'm gonna say 0.26. That's my grade.
Okay, sure, why not? Um, yeah, I wonder if the set should count for points because it's just such a stark, trippy set. Anyway, though, I'm gonna take a page from Luke this week and give this one a grrr. I feel like that is the correct score for this particular episode.
I agree. Well done.
Okay, we'll wrap a bow on this one, I guess, then, unless you had a major point you wanted to throw out there.
No, I think we threw it all up. We can descend into growls ourselves if you'd like, and that could be our ending.
That's it wouldn't be the first time that's happened on these episodes. I guess I'll ask if you have anything to quote unquote plug.
Hmm. Yeah, the next episode, too, which we'll be covering next.
Oh, okay. Then I'll have to rephrase the question. Okay. Anyway, as for this, it is Time Enough Podcast on Twitter and Facebook. You can find us and other podcasts on Patreon under Podcastius, where we talk about sci-fi films at Matt and Luke Sci-Fi Sanctuary, Disney films and Occult Disney. The Prisoner and Imprisoned in Prison, and you can get some video game stuff like Luke Loves Pokemon, the Monster Mash, which talks about Monster Hunter, and the Game Show, which involves four British guys hurling insults at each other, not necessarily screaming, but hurling the insults. Okay, well, I guess I will declare this podcast obsolete. I'm going to stop the recording there.